Milk floats once hummed through dawn's streets, glass bottles clinking like a gentle alarm only Britain understood. The soft rattle of empties on doorsteps told you your neighbours were awake long before curtains moved. Red foam boxes rang with a hard metallic bell, echoing down pavements on wet November evenings. Coins fell into slots with a sharp clink, followed by that hopeful, crackling pause before connection. Newspapers arrived with shouted headlines, sellers' voices bouncing off brick shop fronts and steamed up bus windows. On corner stands, broadsheets snapped in the wind. Each page turned, a small thunderclap of daily drama. In terraced back lanes, kids skipping rhymes and clapping games stitched together the after-school air. The rhythm of 1, 2, 3 over concrete yards felt as permanent as the bricks themselves. Market days had their own orchestra, stall holders calling, scales clinking, paper bags rustling around loose coin. The wet slap of fish on ice sat beside the crack of vegetable crates being dropped open. Old bus engines growled into view, gears protesting as drivers wrestled them through tight suburban corners. The hiss of opening doors announced a small chance to leave, or simply to sit and watch. In living rooms, radios warmed up with a faint electrical buzz before the first BBC voice arrived. Theme tunes and idents threaded through the day, tiny fanfares marking news, comedy, bedtime, closing down. On Saturday mornings, the rattle of letterboxes carried both promise and dread in brown envelopes. The soft thud of glossy catalogues on the mat was its own invitation to dream in installments. Chip shops sang with the hiss of oil, the scrape of metal scoops, the shuffle of wrapped orders. Outside, paper packets whispered in cold hands, opening with a sigh of salt, vinegar and steam. Football echoed across parks as shouts, stud squeaks and the hollow thump of a leather ball. The final whistle was not just a sound, it was the agreed end of everyone's afternoon. Evening streets once carried the soft click of heel plates on cobbles, tiny sparks of rhythm underfoot. Shop doors rang with real brass bells, not motion sensors, each chime announcing an arrival by hand. Cigarette machines coughed out packets with a clunk, coins swallowed reluctantly by heavy steel fronts. Pinball tables and early arcade machines beeped and chimed in dim corners of seaside halls. Record shops throbbed with needle crackle and muffled bass, leaking from listening booths at the back. The soft whoosh of a vinyl sleeve being open meant you were about to borrow someone else's heartbreak. In school corridors, chalk squeaked across blackboards, a thin, nervous line of thought made audible. Exercise books snapped shut in unison, a papery wave rolling from front row to back. Pedestrian crossings clicked decisively before changing, as if the city itself were thinking out loud. Pay packets rustled in brown envelopes, notes counted quietly at kitchen tables after shifts ended. Coal scuttles scraped along hearthstones, followed by the bright, chaotic crackle of newly lit fires. Rain on tin dustbins made its own quick drum solo before plastic and wheelie bins took over. Milk bottle tops popped softly in summer heat, foil domed by cream and curious blue tits. Door chains rattled, bolts slid back, and familiar visitors announced themselves with three-part knock-and signature. Street preachers' voices carried over bus engines and pigeon wings, rising and falling like unexpected weather. The clack of manual typewriters once filled offices, each return carriage a small act of commitment. Public libraries whispered with turning pages and date stamps thunking softly into lending slips. On rainy nights, taxis hissed through puddles outside cinemas, tires tearing silver paths through the streetlight. Tower blocks had their own echo. Doors slamming, lifts grinding, distant radios leaking through concrete. Late night closing time meant a slow fade of laughter, shutters and keys, not just an automatic click. Sunday mornings began with church bells mapping the neighbourhood, each tower claiming its share of sky. Their overlapping chimes stitched together streets that barely spoke to each other during the week. Ice cream vans played electronic lullabies, eerie and cheerful, drifting around corners before you saw the van. Kids could tell brands by melody alone, sprinting home for coins at the first distant bar. On platforms, newspaper trolleys rattled, cases thumped, and announcements wobbled through tired loudspeakers. A single echoed "Stand clear" could carry a whole day's worth of expectation. Back gardens buzzed with hand mowers, the blades' steady clatter rising and falling over fences. Hosepipes hissed across small lawns, a soft applause for striped grass and weekend effort. Inside, kettles whistled on hobs, shrill and urgent, demanding attention from half-finished conversations. Teaspoons chimed against thick mugs, a homely percussion that made even silence feel occupied. High streets once roared with layered sound, buskers, buses, barrows, and the occasional shouted greeting. Now, many of those streets hum instead with air conditioning and the faint buzz of fluorescent light. The slow tick of mantle clocks measured quiet evenings before the glow of endless notifications. You wound them by hand, resetting not just time, but the room's entire rhythm. At night, the last post clanged into metal boxes, a final promise collected in darkness. Sorting offices answered with conveyor belts, rubber flaps, and the slap of envelopes in deep bins. On foggy days, distant foghorns from the coast seeped inland through radio bulletins and imagination. Level crossing bells, factory hooters, school handbells, each small sound once organized a whole town's day. Take them away and the clocks still work, but the hours arrive strangely empty. The vanishing sounds of Britain are not just noises we miss, but certainties we lived inside. Old cinemas murmured with projector work, film threading through dark like a mechanical heartbeat behind the wall. Reels flapped lightly at the end, a soft panic of loose film before the house lights rose. In corner shops, bead curtains clicked against shoulders, while fridges hummed and loose sweets rattled into paper bags. Till drawers slammed shut with a satisfying chunk sealing each tiny deal of the day. Street markets woke to the clank of poles, canvas pulled tight and tape ripped from cardboard boxes. By midday, the chatter and bartering formed a tune everyone knew without hearing it begin. Old pound coins dropped heavier into charity tins, each clink oddly generous in its smallness. Rattling lids outside supermarkets told you exactly how close Christmas or disaster really felt. Taxi offices crackled with radio codes, half of them incomprehensible and entirely reassuring. A single "Yeah love" 5 minutes could make a cold pavement feel less deserted. Bookie shops hummed with muffled commentary, pens tapping, slips tearing, the occasional sharp intake of breath. Even losing had its own soundtrack, a chorus of low curses and nervous laughter. Launderettes sang with drum thumps and soapy water slaps against round glass doors. Plastic baskets scraped across tiled floors, a domestic tide coming and going all afternoon. Video shops breathed static and rewinding tapes, the whine and clunk of machines erasing other people's weekend. Shelves whispered as cases slid along, each hollow plastic click promising borrowed world. Evening streets once held gaps of true quiet between cars, long enough to hear your own step. Now the background never quite switches off, a constant low hiss where distinct sounds used to live. We remember Britain not only in colours and smells, but in the exact pitch of its vanished noises. When those sounds disappeared, places stayed on the map, yet somehow moved further away inside us. Even the silence between programmes on old television sets had a character of its own, a faint electric breath. Test cards and tuning tones once held living rooms in a strange shared pause before the night went dark. On building sites, the metallic ring of hammer on scaffold pole carried across whole estate. Transistor radios leaked commentary from pockets and windowsills, stitching street to stadium in real time. City centres pulsed with the squeal of train brakes, the rush of doors and footsteps spilling onto platforms. Photo booths snapped their shutters 3 times, each flash a tiny thunderclap inside a curtained cage. Petrol stations chimed with rubber hose bells when cars rolled over, a gentle ding announcing each arrival. Typewriter pools in offices rattled like controlled storms, sentences hammered into paper with no undo key. Grocery deliveries once meant the knock of wooden crates and the murmur of drivers who knew your name. Postmen's footsteps were recognizable before they even touched the gate latch or letterbox. Bus conductors' ticket machines whirred and snapped, a wrist flick rhythm that felt almost like sleight of hand. At fun fairs, generators growled behind rides while bulbs crackled and speakers distorted pop songs into something harsh. Slot machines spat out coins in metallic cascades that could turn a quiet afternoon into celebration. Classrooms breathed with the scrape of chairs on linoleum and the soft sigh of pages being turned together. School fields rang with whistle blasts and the distant hollow cheer of house competitions. On winter evenings, gas fires ticked and pinged as metal expanded, a small conversation with the cold. Early morning deliveries thudded against shop shutters before the clatter of them rolling upwards. Public swimming pools echoed with lifeguard whistles, diving splashes, and the slap of wet feet on tile. Somewhere beneath today's constant digital hum, all those older layers of sound still seem to wait for us. When the mind drifts, it often drifts not to images first, but to the exact noise of a world that is gone. Old lorries groaned up hills in low gear, engines labouring loudly enough to shake shop front glass. Cobblers' workshops rang with the rhythm of hammers on leather and nails, a heartbeat for worn-out shoes. Barbers' clippers buzzed close to ears while scissors whispered around the edges, hair falling in soft bursts. Newsagents filled with the slap of magazines hitting counters and the quick flick of lottery tickets. Department stores announced each floor with calm recorded voices and the gentle chime of arriving lifts. Office canteens clattered with trays, cutlery, and the low sea sound of multiple conversations at once. Rail replacement coaches sighed at every stop, air brakes exhaling frustration into already tired evenings. Along canals, narrowboat engines chugged patiently, echoing between warehouses and under soot-stained bridges. Hospital wards hummed with trolleys, curtain rings scraping along metal rails and distant beeps of sturdy old machines. Police whistles once cut through night air with a sharp certainty that made whole streets turn and look. Corner pubs leaked laughter and jukebox bass onto pavements, even before you pushed the door open. Back alleys at closing time heard glass clinks, bottle bins crashing and the slow scrape of heavy locks. Snow days wrapped estates in a muffled hush, broken only by squeaky boots and the carve of sledges. Overhead, the roar of low-flying holiday jets shook gardens, sending washing lines and conversations fluttering. Phone-in shows on late-night radio blended static, confessions and the soft click of callers hanging up. Factory sirens once marked shift changes, a single blast rearranging traffic, buses and kitchen routines. The clatter of prams on curbs and bus steps sounded like parenthood made mechanical and public. Old pound notes crackled differently to modern money, a papery rustle with its own faint authority. In seaside towns, gulls screamed over arcades and pier boards creaked beneath slow, thoughtful footsteps. Close your eyes and the Britain you miss announces itself first, not by sight, but by sound. Some sounds did not vanish all at once. They thinned out slowly until nobody noticed they were gone. One day you realized the milk float never hummed past, the bell never rang, the bottles never clinged. Another day you noticed the phone box was just a memory, yet your ears still half expected its metallic ring. What disappears from the ear lingers in the body, a reflex turning towards noises that no longer arrive. We scroll now in a different kind of silence, filled with tiny clicks that mean nothing to the street outside. Yet in quiet moments, a certain kettle whistle or football chant on old footage can undo years in a heartbeat. The vanishing sounds of Britain are really the vanishing proof that we once moved, waited and hoped together. Listen closely enough and you can still hear them, faint but insistent, in the gaps modern life has not yet filled.